Killer Bee Podcast, Episode 1, Bardstown, Kentucky, The Case of Crystal Rogers. Bardstown, Kentucky. It's a quiet place to live. It's part of the Bourbon Trail. It's a quiet, small town with low crime. In May of 2013, Jason Ellis was a police officer. He's married to Amy Ellis, and they have two little kids, Hunter and Parker. Amy works during the day as a substitute teacher, and Jason works at night as a drug enforcement canine officer. He played semi-professional baseball for a while, but once they had a family, he gave that up. It was important to Jason to be an engaged dad. Jason's shift is usually over at 2:30 in the morning. That day, Jason had a routine. When he got off, he would get off the Bluegrass Parkway and get off at exit 34. Figo was his canine partner. He's half shepherd, half husky. When Jason couldn't take him to work with him, Figo would wait for him in the front yard. His car was in the shop, getting repainted, so Figo had to stay home. As usual in the police world, he got a call on a drunken disorderly, Joseph William Hamilton, who had one arm and a head injury. Jason takes him to the hospital, and the man threatens him repeatedly. Once he's cleared at the hospital, Jason takes him to jail. At 2 a.m., Jason calls off duty for the last time. Jason's taking his normal route home, getting off the Bluegrass Parkway on exit 34. He's only minutes from home. As he's in the bend of the exit, he sees something strange in the middle of the road. There were limbs and branches left in the center of the exit, so at 2:30 in the morning, he pulls his cruiser over to remove the debris. As Jason's removing the debris, shots ring out. He's being ambushed. He's hit multiple times in the chest and the abdomen, in the arm, and in the head. Jason's wounds are fatal, and he dies on scene. A few minutes later, a farmer that's going to work at a distillery happens to come across the scene. He sees Jason down in the middle of the road. He goes to offer assistance and tells the lady behind him to get on the police radio and call for help. Officer down.
Hello? Officer down, Bluefield Road. Station. Officer down. You need to give us a location. Bluefield Road by the wire. There's been a tree limb or something. Officer down, please, emergency.
Yes, sir. Hey, this is Chad Monroe. I know Mike Clark personally. I mean, I can tell him exactly where I'm at. We're on the BG Parkway. We're coming off. We're coming from Bardstown, getting off on the Springfield exit.
I mean, is this going to be a car accident? Is there another vehicle involved, or is it just one vehicle versus a tree, or what?
I've come home from Heaven Hill Distillery. I've just got off work, and there was the police car is sitting in the middle of the road with the lights on, and we didn't know what it was. It's a tree across the road, and I didn't know what it was, and I got out and I went up there and looked, and it's him. I believe somebody's hit him.
Okay, can you tell if he is breathing?
No, sir, he is not breathing. Body temperature is cold.
Dispatch, have you already got EMS toned out that way?
That's correct. We've got EMS started.
4446 unseen.
44.
Officer Ellis was dead on scene. He was shot with two different kinds of ammunition, which could mean two different shooters. There are no suspects in the case. More than 1,000 law enforcement officers attended his funeral. His partner, Figo, laid his paw on the flag-draped coffin to say goodbye. Figo was retired shortly thereafter, and he now lives with the Ellis family. Kathy and Samantha Netherland. In April of 2014, they also live in Bardstown, Kentucky. It's approximately 1 year after Ellis was killed. Kathy was 48 years old and a special education teacher. She was a mother to 2 daughters, Holly and Samantha. Kathy and her girls had just lost their dad to cancer 8 months prior to this. When Holly goes off to college, that leaves 16-year-old Samantha and her mom in the home. Samantha's like any other 16-year-old girl. She was excited to be going to her first prom. There are text messages supporting this. Several days after these text messages are sent, her aunt calls and asks Holly where she is. Holly says she hasn't heard from him either. Samantha's grandfather goes over to their house to find out what's going on. When he walks in, he finds them both dead. Kathy had been shot multiple times. Samantha had been beaten to death. They both had their throats cut. There was nothing missing from the home. The keys, electronics, money, nothing had been taken. In this particular case, they're not sure how many assailants there were. From the violence, Samantha seems to have been the real target of this murder. Her mother may have just been a consequence. The officers had very little to go on. From surveillance videos from businesses in the area, they were able to pick up a black Chevy Impala that may have something to do with the crime. The photo is from a still in a video, which is very grainy. You can't make out how many people are in the car. The family buried Samantha in her prom dress, just so she'd be able to wear it once. Like the Ellis case, the case is cold. Crystal Rogers. Crystal's a 35-year-old mother of 5. In 2016, she's living with her boyfriend, Brooks Hauk. On July 5th, 2016, her family realizes they can't get in touch with her. When they talk to Brooks, they say he hasn't seen her for a few days. Brooks says that she was up playing video games in the middle of the night, but when he wakes up, she's gone, and he doesn't think anything of it. This alarms her family. Her family is the one that calls the police and reports her missing. They find her car abandoned on mile marker 14 on the Bluegrass Parkway. The car had a flat tire from a rusty nail. Whoever had left the car there had driven the car with a flat tire for a ways. The car was unlocked with the keys still in the ignition. Many of her belongings are still in the car. Her dad states that she's had flats before, but she's always driven to the exit. She's never stopped on the expressway. So the family is suspicious. Brooks told police the reason he wasn't surprised when she was gone was because they had a stressed relationship, and she would usually go to her cousins to stay the night. The police fact-check his story. They find out that in the 3 years they'd been together, she's done this once. And the one time, she brought her baby with her. The family said there's no way she'd leave the 2-year-old behind. Brooks never participated in any of the searches for her. Brooks's brother was also a police officer. The police asked him to take a polygraph. The results are inconclusive. Author's note: in my interrogations and investigations, polygraphs are a tool. The interrogator, or the person that's asking the questions, is just as important reading the person as the machine is. The police asked Brooks to give a written statement. He agrees. Before he starts to write it, he receives a phone call. The phone call feels very staged. He's making overt statements like, "Of course I'm innocent. I want to cooperate." The call is from his brother, the police officer. He just stops short of telling him to walk out of the interview. Author's note: as a policeman, you don't interfere with investigations, especially a missing persons, possibly a murder investigation. Just making that phone call in the middle of an interrogation could be a charge. The phone call and general advice from Nick makes police suspicious of him, and they ask him to take a polygraph as well. He refuses. He refuses to take the polygraph until the case is handled by the FBI. When the FBI administer it, it doesn't come back as inconclusive. It comes back as deceitful. In my experience, doing interrogations, cops aren't used to lying. They're terrible liars. They show all the signs from body language to word selection. On December 10th, Nick is suspended from the police department for unspecific reasons. Shortly thereafter, Nick's named as a suspect officially. His brother is fired from the police department. As they're investigating the case, they find out that around Crystal's abandoned car, there was a white sedan. A white sedan is owned by Nick and Brooks' grandmother. By the time police figure this out, she's already sold the car. They try to interview Grandma about the circumstances, and she immediately invokes her Fifth Amendment rights not to speak. Important side note, 5 days after Crystal's disappearance, the home that Brooks and her shared burns to the ground. During the investigation, several of Brooks and Nick's friends had been charged with perjury and lying to the police. Many properties that are owned by the family have been searched, multiple times with multiple search warrants. The fifth part of this case, Crystal's dad. On November 16th, just a few months after Crystal's disappearance, her dad goes out for the first day of hunting season. He's shot in the chest in his deer stand. It's initially ruled as a hunting accident. It occurred not far from where Crystal's car was found. The case is currently open as a homicide. There are no suspects. The theory is that Crystal's dad was getting close to answers. Several days before his death, he made statements that he felt like he was being followed. He took the precaution of putting a camera on his vehicle. The police have that footage, but they haven't released any of it. Summary: the speculation on the case. The theory is that Ellis discovered something drug-related, possibly corruption in the police department. Whoever killed him knew his route home, knew his schedule, knew that he didn't have his dog with him that day. The murders of Kathy and Samantha. The theory is that they saw something they shouldn't have, and that they should be silenced. From the crime scene, with nothing being taken, it seems the motive was actually to commit the murders. They may not have known that they had seen something or heard something they weren't supposed to, so they never knew it was coming. Crystal's disappearance is tied to Brooks and Nick, and possibly their connection with the police department. She may have heard or seen something she shouldn't have. The theory is that Nick was involved in something and probably got his brother involved. Shortly before all these murders occurred, a new mayor was elected. He had fired the assistant chief for allegations of corruption. The assistant chief had been shredding documents related to narcotics cases and internal affairs reports. There is the possibility that all these murders and missing persons cases are unrelated, but it's unlikely. The case is currently ongoing. The FBI is in charge of the case now. They recently did multiple search warrants on the properties owned by Brooks and his brother. No suspects have been officially named in any of the cases. Thank you for listening. This has been my first true crime podcast. I'll be doing one a week, releasing every Sunday. Be safe, and God bless.